Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa, and I'm your co-host and producer, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you doing? Oh no, you're muted. That's how you're doing. No one can hear you. Give me the same energy, but when we can hear you.
Well, I was just going to say it's Friday. It's the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. So
Yes.
I'm very excited. We have a nice long weekend coming up. Weather's beautiful, but apparently it's supposed to storm all along the East Coast.
Ew, don't say that.
Mm-hmm.
No,
That's what I saw at least.
No, I haven't checked. It's my plans are to be in the sunshine all week. No.
That's what I was hoping too. I was hoping to get some rooftop vibes going on, to have a good time, have some friends over, but we'll see. It might have to be indoors.
I don't know about Pittsburgh. It's gonna be beautiful here. So you keep the nonsense up there. I don't want.
Maybe it's a Northeast thing.
Maybe. Well, let's find out. Today we are talking with Anthony Cofrancesco with PickFu. Anthony, how are you doing? And I believe you're calling from Maryland, right?
I am, yeah. And I'm hoping that the weather is going to be really good too. I don't really believe the weather forecast ever. And if it does rain, it's still going to be beautiful in one way or another. So I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for asking.
Good, of course. And what part of Maryland are you calling from?
I grew up in a little tiny town called Havre de Grace. And it's a really cute town right on the water. I came back to get my vaccination. And so I'm just here for a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. So, but where do you call home now, though?
That's a really complicated question. For the past 3 years, I've been living in the Philippines, in Manila. I traveled back all the way last year. I was traveling to Prague for a conference when the whole world shut down, and I couldn't get back to the Philippines, and I didn't really know where to go. So I went back to the States for a few months, and then earlier this year, I was living in Brazil for a few months in Florianopolis, and then I just came back to get my vaccine, and I'm headed back to Central America early next month.
Wow.
You're a nomad.
Yeah.
Hopefully going to be able to get back to Manila at some point, but right now I can't get in.
Yeah. Well, that'll probably take a while, right? Do they have, are you able to fly? Like, is anybody able to get in, or do they have like the 2-week shutdown, be in a hotel, they bring you meals kind of thing like China has?
Yeah. So I'm more than happy to go into a quarantine in a hotel. That's no problem at all. But right now, I can't get in at all. Only people you can't get in if you just have a tourist visa. And I just had a tourist visa getting in. So no foreigners allowed at the present moment.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, and I just have one more question because I didn't get to ask you this before the show. Before we get into your professional background, I'm curious, what part of Italy is your family originally from? Because Cofrancesco is an Italian last name, if ever I've heard one.
Yeah. So the cool story behind that is my cousin, he lived in Italy for 7 years, and he actually did a lot of work tracing back our family heritage. And so there's a really small town right in the south around Naples, and there's about 1,000 people that live in the town. And about like 200 or 300 of them have the last name of Cofrancesco. So that's where we're from. And they're very excited anytime an American Cofrancesco comes. He's gone a couple of times. The whole town throws like a little bit of a party. So that is high on the bucket list. I've only been in Italy for a few days. But yeah, that's the story. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the name of the town?
I don't actually know the name of the town. I've never been. We've just chatted briefly about it. I can ask my cousin. He would know. But one interesting thing is, like, over there, they pronounce it Cofrancesco, but then when they came to the United States, they kind of dropped that, and it's just Cofrancesco now, because everyone always asks, how do you say the last name?
Yeah. Well, and if your cousin, he probably knows this too. I think it's still true today, but not many years ago, if you could prove that your family still owned land in Italy, you could get dual citizenship.
Yeah, he knows a lot about that. We've actually talked in depth. That's something that's high on the list. I know a few people have gone through that process. So one day that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah. I was also told to find the land when I was there, but I didn't have enough time. So American citizen, I remain. Well, Anthony, let's go on ahead and dive into your professional background then. So I watched your episode with Dustin and Chris on 2 Amazon sellers and a microphone yesterday. Nice. And I don't want you to have to repeat everything that you already gave to the people yesterday, but for our listeners, if you do want to give a rundown of your professional background. So you worked at Amazon, I'm sorry, and you implemented the x-rays at the door, right? That's super cool. That was your white paper.
And I don't mind diving into the story. I've done it a lot.
Do the whole thing then.
I think it's actually kind of cool sometimes because there's other people out there that might be thinking about a career change and it seems very scary. And people sometimes look at my life and they're like, wow, I don't know how you did it. And I think sometimes when you hear the whole story, it kind of puts in perspective that taking risk really can be a big game changer in terms of what your career trajectory looks like. But, I started out working for Amazon. This was a number of years ago as an intern. I was like kind of on between with college, deciding if I wanted to go or not go. I did my internship with Amazon, did a really good job, was able to get through a quite large white paper while still an intern. I got a good job offer coming out of that. And I asked Amazon, I said, hey guys, like, I'm really not planning on continuing or finishing college, but I want to work for you. Is that going to be a problem? And they said, we really don't care. That's not a problem at all. And so at that point, it was very solidified for me. I didn't really have the strength to say I wanted to drop out. But at that point, I was cool to tell my parents. I was like, hey guys, I know you're not going to like this, but I got a job at Amazon. So I feel like this is okay. And so I dropped out of college and I signed my contract to go work for them full time. In the few months between when that internship ended and the full-time job started, a friend of mine who we had gone to some e-commerce conferences, he was like, why don't you come out to the Philippines and I'll teach you how to sell on Amazon. He had been an FBA seller for a number of years and I had known about the industry, but never jumped in. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything else. I might as well. It's a good way to spend a few months. So a few of us went out there, we packed in a house, like real low cost living, and we just grinded and hustled. And that's when I really learned about really the details of the whole process of selling on Amazon and worked to launch my first product. Went to work at Amazon full time. And, the role that I was doing full time was the same role I was doing as an intern, but just full time. And so I was in fulfillment center operations, working specifically in loss prevention. So things related to vendor fraud, employee theft. I got taught how to do interrogations, which was really interesting and exciting. Physical protection of the building as well. So like handling natural disasters. I was at a FC in Houston during Hurricane Harvey. So a lot of contingency planning and things like that. And so I worked for Amazon for almost a year, really enjoyed it a lot. I don't have anything negative to say. I think a lot of the headlines you see about how terrible Amazon is to work are dramatically untrue. And most employees that work there are really happy to be there. And I'm not just saying that. Like I talked to a lot of them. That was like my job to really interact. But at the, around the 1 year mark, the same guy who had taught me how to sell on Amazon was like, hey, I've got this creative agency that service listings for Amazon FBA sellers. Why don't you come out to the Philippines, quit your job and help me scale this creative agency? So again, I'm thinking, well, this is crazy. I've got a good job. I'm a college dropout. If I quit this job, none of my stock had vested. I'm going to have to repay a big signing bonus and a big relocation bonus, all to go out and make $2,000 a month, but which was like, not very much money. And I knew if I didn't do that, though, I had this gut feeling I'd end up regretting it. So I put in my 2 weeks notice, told my boss, and about a month later, I was out in the Philippines. So for the next 2 years, I worked on scaling this creative agency. At the time, it was a real small company, just about 7 employees, and just doing photography and graphic design. And we scaled that thing to more than 20 full-time employees with an added on video and copywriting, really servicing every part of the listing. And then at the end of 2 years, we were able to exit that business. There was an aggregator. They're very popular, very common now, but back then it was a much smaller thing. And they were using it as a strategic fit for their business to kind of service their own listings. So we sold the company. I helped with the transition. And then I made a little bit of money, but not enough to never work again. So I was like, okay, I knew I wanted to stay in the industry. I could see how much growth potential there still was in e-commerce. And so I made a list of all the places I really wanted to go and what was going to be my next thing. And one of the services we used heavily at our agency was PickFu. I had met the founders previously. So I reached out to them. At the time, they had like a marketing assistant position open, and I didn't care. I was like, whatever, so I applied for that. We had maybe 3 or 4 calls, and it was pretty clear that wasn't going to be what I was going to do. And so we kind of just invented this role of industry liaison. And I said, I think everyone should know about this product. And the founders, they've got families, they've got kids. And I was like, look, I'm a young, more or less, I don't have any ties anywhere. So you can send me around the world. I'll go to conferences, I'll create educational material, and I'll really help to conceptualize how we're going to develop the product and help train our customers. And so that's what I've been doing for the past year. And that's my story.
That's awesome.
Wow. You are the definition of burning. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, burning the candle at both ends. I was going to say, if you haven't done Yoni Mazur's show yet, you should.
I have. Yeah. He's a great guy. I was one of his first episodes. Yeah. He's super cool.
No, burning the boats.
Oh, burning boats.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know about burning boats?
I don't think I've heard that one.
No? Burning boats. I think it was it Spanish conquistadors that came, and I don't know if it was Spanish conquistadors. It was Europeans that came to the Americas, and I think they got an order to go back to Europe or something like that. And they said, no, fuck it, we're going to stay here. So they burned all their boats, and they said, we're going to start setting up farmland and a bunch of other stuff.
If you listen to our very first episode with Ken Wilson from Firing the Man, he tells it very eloquently, because he has this big sign behind him that says burn the boats. And we're like, what the fuck is that? And he told us the whole story. But it's essentially like, you have no other way out. Burn the boat. You are here. Do it.
Yeah. Make it happen. Yeah, that's cool.
But question about when you were previously an Amazon seller, which first of all, your story is fascinating. The way that you're so open to just jumping and sort of taking these risks, which is everything about selling on Amazon. It's all risks, right? And every Amazon seller is essentially mitigating these in whichever way possible, whether they're still working and, supporting their Amazon business with their salary. But when you were an Amazon seller, how did you learn about supply chain? It's a question I don't get to ask enough, but specifically for Amazon sellers, we think that it's very important because everything is built on supply chain, right? Without a quality product, you're not going to be able to do good marketing. You're not going to be able to run successful PPC ads. So how did you learn about supply chain when you first started?
I was really lucky. I never took a course. I went to a couple conferences before, but just because I was in college and we kind of hustled the owners and said, hey, we're poor college kids. Can you give us tickets to this conference? So we went to a Startup Bros conference in Orlando, and we went to ones all over. And so I never took a course, but the guy who taught me how to sell on Amazon, who later became my business partner in the creative agency, he had been doing it for years. And so he literally sat us down. He also had I can say this, but I can't say whose they are. He had made some really good connections at those conferences. And he had back then there were no courses, not as good as they are now. And it was these long Google Docs of just and you can't share these with anyone. These are insider things. And so he was like, go, before you come out to the Philippines, read through this whole thing. It was 95 pages. He's like, after you get through this, you'll have a good understanding of how this works. You need to read this before you come out, and then I'll teach you beyond that. And so pretty much how all of it worked is I read through that doc, I absorbed it, took notes, went out there. And then that was just the base. That's just the starting knowledge. And then there's still all these intricacies and problems. So it was really hands-on. That I remember I was out there with another guy who also sells on Amazon now. And we were doing product selection. We were telling him, hey, what about this product? And 90% of them was nope, you don't want to do this because of this, and this. And then when it came to the supply chain stuff, it wasn't hand-holding, but very, he was really supportive. I don't want to take a lot of credit even for launching my own product, because a lot of the back-end logistical work he was really, really helpful with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And did you use Alibaba for sourcing?
Alibaba for sourcing entirely, yeah. And all remote sourcing. He also had a sourcing agent at the time that we had access to, if we needed it, then, but still I do remember sending all of these messages to suppliers, negotiating rates and trying to figure out hey, what improvements, ordering samples and things like that.
And for product launches, and I don't know if you'd be open to going into details, but for product launches, would you start off with minimum order quantities to test the market? Just I think a lot of Amazon sellers do.
Back then, this was still when you could use viral launch and product giveaways were a good way to rank. Now that's not really so much of the case. But back then it was a little bit more open on that. And so what we did was we looked at what we had a good calculation for what was the amount of initial inventory that you're going to sell, that you think you're going to sell. Plus, I want to say it was maybe 300 units for minimum for product giveaways. So somewhere between, it was the 750 to 1,000 range. I can't quite remember. And then almost, and what blew my mind initially too, because I moved out there and like, you know, I didn't have all of that much money. And I just remember we sold through, the product sold well. We did the initial launch, sold well. And I was like, oh, sweet, I'm making this money. And then he told me, he's like, nope, now you got to take all of that and we got to go double the amount of inventory. And I was just like, this is freaking crazy. And I think a lot of sellers, they don't realize that. They're like, wow, I got the bestseller badge, and they move up. And I remember getting the Amazon Choice badge early on, and I was like on top of the world. And then it's like, nope, this is like the first step in a very long process.
Yeah, I think that's a complicated. First of all, it was a complicated question to begin with, but it's even more complicated now with mixed messages and signals from different courses. So some might say, "Hey, negotiate lower MOQs," but then they might hear a different course saying, "Well, you want to negotiate the best price," and then another one says, "No, focus on quality." So then I think some sellers, they might hear all these and they say, "Oh, well, I want the best quality at the best price with the lowest MOQ." And I'm going to negotiate this 500 MOQ to 200 because I want to test the market, and I don't want to pay the extra charge for the product itself. For me personally too, the best advice I've been given, and I think it's really true. I think a lot of people want to go in and negotiate price from the beginning, but you don't negotiate things. Price is the last thing you're going to negotiate, and it's going to be really based off a good relationship with the supplier. And there's many more financial factors that you can negotiate outside of price. Like payment terms are, I think, much stronger. And where I think a lot of sellers get wrong is they're trying to get the lowest price from the start, when in reality, you should be focusing on the product, the quality of the product, because that's what's going to allow you to validate it. Like, you're not going to make any money. I don't know if I should be saying this, but you're not going to make any money in your first 2 years of running an Amazon business, or at least you shouldn't be taking any money out of the business. You should be putting it all back in. And I think that's and if it happens in another way, you do make money, then that's fine. And that's great. But like, you should be looking to validate the product, put out a high quality product, get a good sales trajectory. And then once you're doing well, that's when you're going to have the ability. You're like, hey, I've got a year-long relationship with the supplier. And that's when you start really getting the gains of, you know, lowering your cost. I mean, that's just the way that I see it. Like, I don't think you can't get all three at once. It's just, and if a supplier tells you that you're probably going to end up getting a lower quality product, because that's just how it works. That's the reality in my mind.
You just summarized like 3 episodes of this podcast. No joke.
Yeah. I mean, it's way too often that I do see, because I've spoken to thousands of sellers at Noviland when it comes to sourcing, and a lot of their mindset is that they do want to start making money the first time. I want to start being profitable from the get-go, which to me doesn't make sense without even having a relationship. And so how would you build relationships with your suppliers? I know you had a sourcing agent, but how did that sort of get implemented into the process too?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that how you're going to build relationships is long-term consistency with the supplier, right? It's like, how do you build relationships anywhere in life? It's like, you ask for something, you deliver. How do you build relationships in the real world? It's like, you're consistent. You say you're going to do something and you deliver on it. And then what a relationship is based on is like, based on that consistency. Like, I go to conferences all the time. I meet someone, we really hit it off, but that's just like the starting point of a relationship. I can't go and ask them for really, really in-depth things. That's only going to happen from me giving a little bit. They're going to give, we're going to go back and forth and give each other value. And so it's the same thing for a supplier. Like, what's a supplier going to want? They're going to want to, oh, sorry, the dog's barking a little bit.
Yeah,
the supplier, they're going to want to, what's important to a supplier? They're going to want to get paid on time. They're going to want consistently increasing order quantities. They're going to want to be reasonable to work with, you launching new product lines. And so think about like, what's the supplier going to want? And if you give them those things, and then if you can have the X factor of, you know, it's around Chinese New Year and you're going to send them a gift and you're going to ask about their family. Maybe if you can take a trip out there and actually meet them. Those are like little X factors. So if you run the business and give them the things they want from a business perspective, and then you can go to the next level of bringing the human element in, then you're golden, right? That's how these things are made.
I love that. That's and I've said it on a few of our episodes, I think, but just an element of kindness is, right, I think, what's lacking really in this industry. And I think it is just because we are very transactional by nature, with e-commerce being just, let me buy this, it's going to be a low price, and I expect a low price everywhere I go, and I expect a quick checkout.
Well, and the thing too about being transactional is there's nothing wrong with being transactional. And in my experience too, sometimes where I think people go wrong is they're not upfront about what they actually want. right? They're not direct. And sometimes I think people will actually appreciate, you need to get an idea for what you want for your product and your brand. And you need to have it very clear in your mind so you can go and say, this is exactly what I want. Not in terms of price, right? You probably can't control that as much as you'd like, but like, this is what I want. Or like, you know, who I really like watching is Kian Golzari. And he talks a lot about like, what you really want from the supplier is you want that insight. They're seeing products come through the factory. They're up with the current trends. They know like what kind of extra material is sitting in their factory that you could potentially integrate into your product. And so like, that's really where I think that's where you get the big gains. You're not going to come in and say like, oh, I want to make this. They're going to get it they're trying to sell this microphone to me for $30 and I want to get it for like $25. If that's your thought, like, you know, go and buy a factory. Like you're never going to, you know, you might be able to save a little bit of money, but where the next level thing is going to come from is they're like, oh, well, we've got this new part, which is going to make it much better. And no one knows about this. And this is the whole reason why you go to trade shows is like, you want to find out about what the trend is going to be 2 years from now. You want to find that out before everyone else. And that's how you make serious gains in your product in terms of development. And I think too many people are just focused on like, I just want to make it cheaper. Like that's just a race to the bottom and it's just not going to be sustainable in most cases. Unless you've got a lot of money.
100%.
Yeah, no, it's thank you for your perspective on that. I think a lot of sellers are hopefully not going to take that with a grain of salt. They're going to take that into perspective of their own business, which is very important nowadays, and not just whatever they hear, you know, from some guru out there that wants to sell them a course, which there's nothing wrong with courses. I've grown to actually grow kind of fond of courses lately. I had a different perspective a few months ago. I think they do deliver some level of value, but I think some of them might just have some level of miscommunication.
Yeah. Not all courses are made the same.
I agree.
Yeah.
I definitely.
I'm sure you have the inside scoop. But tell us about PickFu. I watched a few of the YouTube videos for PickFu itself, and I know Lisa. So when Lisa first joined us, a big part of what she brought was, hey, well, why don't we just split test that? Can we just A/B test it, or can we test out different colors? Or, and of course, from a marketing perspective, that makes a lot of sense. And then I think we had a conversation also one time in the office about Amazon and about split testing on Amazon. And we said there's nothing out there for it. And so we found out about PickFu eventually. So what exactly is PickFu? How does it work?
Yeah, so PickFu, it's a really simple concept. Just think about market research, right? Market research is nothing new. When a company like Nike or Under Armour, when they launch a product, they're going to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars before they take that product to market to ensure that they haven't messed it up, right? That the packaging or the product design, this is something that people actually want. We've all seen back in the day, right? Like focus groups, looking through the glass, people playing with the product. And so market research is nothing new. Where PickFu came from is they realized that, okay, most market research is way out of the reach of small business owners or third-party sellers, right? And so the whole thought was like, how can we democratize market research and make it accessible and also make it fast for business owners that want rapid feedback? A lot of business owners, when they go, their only source of feedback is, and I talk to Amazon sellers all the time, and they're like, I was like, okay, where do you go for feedback? And they say, I go and ask my wife, and she's like, you know, what do you think about the product packaging? And you can tell people's spouses, they just don't get it. And they just, at some point, it's like, that is not a good path of action. And so rather than going with your gut, rather than asking a stranger or someone in your family, PickFu is a way that it's a platform where you can upload your creative assets, upload your idea into the platform, and you'll start getting real access to customer insights, real people right away. And so that's really what it is. People are voting between the options that you upload, but then they're also giving you detailed feedback as to why they chose those options. And that's really helpful, not just seeing which one won, but trying to understand why that option won.
It is like kind of like a digital focus group, like an e-focus group instead. I always think of the focus group in New Girl with the Sponge, which is so funny. But you can either just get like general through PickFu, you can just get like general feedback from people, maybe not general feedback from like a general population, or you can dive down into like the buyer personas that you're looking to market towards, right? Like you can get pretty specific with the information that you're requesting.
Yeah, and that's what makes PickFu pretty unique, is that we already have curated audiences. So a whole bunch of different gender, age range, hobby, interest kind of demographics. And so you can say, hey, I want to put this question in front of moms that drink wine, and you can dial it into that. That's kind of where the real value is, versus if you use another platform or you're just kind of asking random people, you don't know who these people are. You don't know if they're really in your target market. I know for me personally, and I know a lot of other sellers, we sell products sometimes and the target market is the exact opposite of who we are, right? And so like, how do you actually go and sell a product? Let's say you're selling, like for me, let's say I'm selling a women's product in the fitness category. Like, I don't know very much about those, or like a dog owner. I love dogs, but I've never had a dog. So how would I go and actually sell a product into that category if you're not your target market?
Mm-hmm. And where do you find, this sounds like a dumb question, but where do you find these people to give the feedback? Like, how do folks know to sign up to be?
Yeah, so we just kind of walk around in stores, and then when the question comes in, we show them the phone and we say, "What do you think?" No, I'm just kidding. So we use a third party panel. So they've got a bunch of people, and from there we curate our own panel within of that. We've got more than 10,000 people, and right now they're all based in the United States, and so they handle getting the people, but their panel is much bigger. What makes PickFu unique is we trim that panel down extensively, and we're always thinning it out and removing people based on the quality of their responses and if they're a good fit in the panel.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is. That's a lot of people also that you can actually go through. And so when it comes to A/B testing itself, I guess, what is the process? Should someone that's just starting out on Amazon, hasn't sold the product yet, just has product pictures done, let's say, should they start A/B testing on PickFu? And I'll just give you my perspective. I would think that they would go through selling for a short while, using PickFu, getting the detailed, I guess, information or feedback, and then seeing how their sales are affected by that change.
So if you're just starting out, I'd say PickFu is most helpful in terms of early product validation. So these are things like actually designing your product and things like your product packaging. And I'll explain why. So also your like branding and logos. What I try to think of is like, okay, every creative thing that you do for your business, how much does it cost, and what's going to be the time requirement to change it? So let's say I'm picking my brand name and my logo, right? We all know that when you're going through the trademark process, this is going to take, like in the US, it's going to take 6 to 9 months, and it's pretty expensive to do. And so this is something that when I'm picking my brand name, I'm deciding on my logo, before I go through that long process, I'm going to run it through PickFu, because this is something that I want. This is going to be with me for a long time. It's going to take a lot of time to change. So PickFu is very helpful there. When I'm designing my product, again, this is something that you don't want to get wrong. Let's say your MOQ is like 500 or 1,000 units. The example I like to give is, there's a breakfast in bed tray, right? Like a wooden breakfast in bed tray. You do your product research. It comes back, this is trending. It's hot. I'm going to make a lot of money selling. But how do I know? Should I sell this in the dark wood grain, or should I sell it in the light wood grain? If I'm selling a quantity pack, like a party supply kit, should I sell this in a 25 pack, a 50 pack, or a 100 pack? These would be pretty fundamental things to get wrong from the get-go. Additionally, same thing with your product packaging, right? I think for most products, it's going to make sense to have product packaging. Before you go and print this, like once you print your packaging, you're going to have to sell through all that inventory before you're going to be able to change it again. It's a little bit labor intensive. And so before you go, and it's going to cost you every time you have that packaging printed, it's going to cost you money. So this is something that you want to get right from the get-go. So if you're starting off, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think of PickFu as kind of like a small insurance policy. Just you're paying a little bit of money, but it's going to help you have peace of mind that, okay, I'm not putting something on my packaging that's really unclear or that doesn't look good or something like that. Once you've been selling for a while, and even early stages of selling, everyone knows, I think now it's very common knowledge about this honeymoon period that Amazon gives you. Back in my old agency, we used to say, YOLO actually stands for you only launch once. And so like before we would put clients' listings up, we would do PickFu testing. We would try to make sure that the image set, before they actually upload their images into the image gallery, they're pre-vetted, they're really good. We've cleared that up so that when they have that honeymoon period, they're going to start converting right from the beginning, rather than saying, hey, we're going to do this 6 months to a year in. I think a lot of the reasons that sellers don't do this is because they don't allocate enough for creative. They don't allocate enough for market research. And so they got their cost of goods. They've got all these other charges associated with getting their product first into FBA. And then it's like they've spent 10 grand on their product launch. And then it comes down to, okay, let's get some creative. And they're like, okay, I could spend $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 on this whole thing, but let me go to Fiverr and see if I can get it done for $500. And that's just totally backwards in my mind, because you wouldn't skimp on your product costs. You wouldn't skimp on your inspections or anything along the way. But they get to this last stage, which is creative optimization. That can include A/B testing. It can include, actually getting the design work and the photography done. But they get there and like, okay, how can I save some money here? And it's totally backwards in my mind. And it's where a lot of people mess up.
And can we, for anybody listening who may not be aware, can we get a quick definition of what A/B testing actually is, also known as split testing? I think I prefer A/B, but.
Sure. Yeah. So A/B testing, I think is such a cool concept. I remember even before I started selling on e-commerce, I was building my own little Wix websites, and I was like, oh, the whole concept of A/B testing is so cool and so helpful. But basically, an A/B test essentially says you're going to have an A version and a B version of something. The simplest way is imagine a button on a website. And so your checkout button. And so you're saying, hey, should we do an orange button or should we do a blue button? And so what the A/B test is going to do is at random, it's going to show 50% of the audience one version, and at random, it's going to show the other 50% of the audience another version. And then it's going to see if there's any meaningful difference between the two. Maybe the orange button is actually going to get 20% more clicks than the blue button. Sometimes there's not much of a difference, but that's the general concept of split testing.
And you always want to just be changing one variable within that item you're testing though, right? So like if you have the checkout button that's orange with a different, or maybe not checkout button, a CTA. If you have a CTA that's orange with different messaging than a blue one, then you can't actually tell what the difference is. So you're trying to identify this one item of, okay, which one is more effective? Except maybe like in the terms of like a logo, you guys had some really cool examples on your site of like the logos being different, like totally different from each other. Same general, one was like a squid and like a little octopus or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely right there. You want to isolate an individual variable every time. Sometimes we see it where they're changing multiple things. We don't really recommend doing that. And it's not because we're trying to get you to run more PickFu tests. It's because you really want to dial in on changing individual factors at a time. But with that being said, I think with PickFu isn't really a true A/B test because it's really market research. It's outside of the scope of, it's not real. It's a sandbox environment, right? These are not real people buying your product. And so the reason that, the only reason that I'd say sometimes it's okay to change more abstract concepts from a visual standpoint is because on an A/B test, right? If I change the color of a button, I'm just going to know which one won. I'm not going to necessarily understand why, I picked the orange color because orange is my favorite color or because it was more visually appealing. Versus PickFu, you have the additional benefit of not just seeing which one won, but they give you feedback as to why. So for me, it's like, it's okay sometimes. I wouldn't recommend going too different, but I can change a little bit more on the logo because now I can go and read the feedback and say, hey, I picked the squid with the blue eyes and blah, blah, blah because of this. And then I'm gonna take that feedback and try to make a better iteration. But yeah, generally I'd recommend trying to keep them the same. Where I think it's a little bit backwards sometimes is like people they're trying to decide between different branding, and they're not only having two different logos, but the brand names are also different. Like that's way too much of a difference versus it's the same brand name and like maybe the font type and the icon is different on both. I'm okay with that, right? Because you're looking at the logo holistically and you're saying, okay, which one of these is better? But like at least the name of the brand is the same.
And speaking of names, I had heard on the show yesterday that you always get asked what the weirdest thing is people try to test. And the one you're allowed to say is your boss had seen what folks were going to think of the name he was going to potentially name his child. Be sure he wasn't going to get made fun of for having a unique name. Did he end up going with that name?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I think it was like, from what I understand, it was pretty low risk, but he was particularly sensitive to what it's like to be bullied growing up and wanted to just make sure, which is actually kind of a unique, it's a really unique idea to think how valuable that feedback is. I remember I had a customer from in my prior agency. I had a customer from Singapore. I don't know if I can say the brand. Well, I feel fine saying the brand name because I don't think they're selling the product anymore. But she had this great idea for this kid's backpack. It was like this unicorn kid's backpack. And we went out and we were meeting with our clients in Singapore. And the name of the brand she wanted to do was Fat Rolls. And it had this is what it said on the children's backpack. And she's like, oh, I love it so much because I think about my kids and like I see their chubby cheeks and it's like a really cute thing. And I was like, and I'm pretty sure she didn't go with that, but we didn't run a PickFu test on it. It was a little bit before that time. But I was like, you can't put this on a kid's backpack, like selling into an American market. Like she's from Singapore, maybe she doesn't get it, but like you're gonna get made fun of. Really, like you have the Fat Rolls backpack. That's just a terrible idea. Like really bad. You know?
I'm French, and my name is Francois. It's called French fry in elementary school. So it's pretty easy for kids to come up with some messed up things.
Right.
Vicious, man.
They're vicious. I had a question when it comes to A/B testing for product customization. Yeah. So I know we mentioned you want to try to isolate, like, let's say, this color or that color. But what if you had, I don't really have anything around me that could be, I guess, let's say this water bottle. Yeah. Right. And instead of just saying, do I want to do this one in white or black? What if you said I wanted to do a different type of nozzle and the handle be a little bit bigger and the sizing be smaller? Would you independently test all three of those different tests?
Yeah, so sometimes what we'll see is we'll do an open-ended feedback poll. We'll put up the product and we'll say, okay, this is a water bottle for, you're trying to like measure your water consumption throughout the day, or it's like a large volume bottle. What would you do? What would you do to make this product better, right? Or like what flaws do you see with the product? And so the feedback you might get there might say like, oh, well, is this handle going to be sturdy because it's holding a lot of water? Or like, how does the water come out in terms of the nozzle? And so you might get some ideas there. In terms of if I was trying to isolate one thing at a time, or if you should, I would probably recommend if it's a functional variation, then I would, because I try to frame that actually into the question itself. So I'll say, hey, like here's the before and after of this water bottle, and we're thinking about making the nozzle this way, and here's the reason why. Like, what do you think is better? Or if I was going between two different nozzle types, I'm thinking about how it might work for that, but maybe the handle type might be a better example. So it's like you have a normal thin handle, and then you've got this really beefy ergonomic design. And so you say like, hey, we're developing this water bottle. We have this thin, and then we have this ergonomic design. Which one would you choose? And then if you see the feedback is like, actually, I think that's too bulky of a design. When you think, oh, this ergonomic design is going to be a slam dunk, this is going to be the feature that everyone's going to love about the water bottle. And then what they're actually saying is like, the handle doesn't really matter. It sits on my desk 90% of the time. And actually the handle's not important, but what's really important is it's on my desk at work and it's going to drip everywhere. So I'm more worried about condensation on the bottle, or I'm worried about, is it going to have a non-slip design, or, what it might be like that. And so I try to isolate, especially in product development, try to probably isolate one factor at a time.
Wow. That's invaluable. I mean, that's something where you can save a company tens of thousands of dollars by not investing in the wrong mold, by not, having to go through the entire design and development process itself. We've definitely seen that firsthand. We get that feedback a lot, that people are saying, hey, we had an idea for a new variation of a product line that they think they're like, oh, this is going to be my secret sauce. And I've done well growing this brand. This is what's going to get me to 8 or 9 figures. And then they go and test this new product development idea, and people just aren't as excited about it as the owners are, because sometimes we're very close to our products. And so that's something we hear very commonly. And that's why I think PickFu is so valuable in terms of product validation and design, because again, this is something that if you come to an idea on a product design, your MOQ is 1,000 units, and then you go and buy these things, and now it's like, oh, you make the wrong decision. This is something you're going to be stuck with until you sell that inventory, and in a lot of cases, they don't sell, and you're paying storage fees, and now you gotta pull them out, and that's like now you're going to try to liquidate them, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's nuts. I did not realize that you can also do that for the product development. I guess I didn't think about it. And I guess that even leads to the next question. What is possible? And it's a very open-ended question. What is possible when it comes to A/B testing with PickFu?
Oh, your mic actually went out.
Oh, there we go. Basically what we'll say is anytime you're making a major creative decision or a major design change, that's when you should be using PickFu. PickFu really can be used for absolutely anything. So, early on when you're first selling, product design and development, product packaging, branding, and anything related to your brand, so your logo, your trademarks, things like that. Beyond that, once you start getting into the actual listing itself, main image is probably one of the biggest ones. How can you optimize the main image for clear communication of what the product is, increase your click-through rate? You've got your image gallery, which is incredibly important. So how can you optimize your infographics to have really clear communication messages? That is a really, really big one. Lifestyle images, before you go and spend all the money doing a lifestyle shoot, can you test stock images or other images you find online and see which one the customer is best going to relate to the situations you're looking at? Moving down the listing, you've got your title. So you might have done some research online and find that, or your product, you've done your keyword research and you found out what words should be in your title. You can go and see what's the order that I should put these in, or what's going to give the best clarity to what I'm actually trying to sell. Your bullet points are a big one. You can upload those and try to find like what words should you lead off your bullet points with. And then beyond that, going down the A+ content is a really big one. You can actually test that natively inside of Amazon right now. And then video as well. Video is something that's real important to the listing, but it's really expensive to do. So coming up with the concept of your video, a really big one we see is picking the correct voiceover. You have a lot of different options when you're picking your voiceover from a place like Fiverr or Upwork or wherever. So getting your voiceover to match, we often see videos that are really good, but then the voiceover is bad, and so it doesn't work. Your background images, your talent for being a spokesperson, etc. And so there's a lot of different options. It's really unlimited. I hope that kind of answers it.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, and that information that you're able to test, before you even launch that's applicable for any of the e-commerce platforms, not just Amazon, but that's a really powerful tool for these sellers. The voiceovers, I never would have thought about, because I hear like a good voiceover and a bad voiceover. It's like, okay, that's bad. I need a new one. Like if it's obviously a computer, I wouldn't even begin to think that one would be better than another, as long as the sound quality is fine. That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's that. Recently we actually did a design competition for Kevin King, and one of the agencies submitted a video, right? And the video was really, really a strong video, but the voiceover was just not good. And so the feedback from Karen, Thomas at Helium 10, and Kevin was both like, you missed the mark on the voiceover. And the crazy thing was, we gave them, the agencies, unlimited access to use PickFu, and they tested it for a lot of other things. But if they would have tested their voiceover in advance, they probably would have done a lot better on the video portion, just because they missed the mark on that.
So what are they testing for? Accents?
Just like imagine it's like I'm looking for a voiceover, and it's like I want like an epic voiceover. I want like a British accent. If you go to Fiverr and you type in British voiceover talent, you're going to get like 30 different options. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to see like, hey, we're selling a cleaning product. Which of these is best going to resonate with this? And I might have a picture of the product. And then you upload the sample voiceover tracks for those artists. We use it for PickFu. We've seen it a lot. This is real good. Real works really well.
And would you get them both done and then upload it to PickFu, or does PickFu give you like options? Like you could try a British accent I don't know. How does that work? What exactly?
What I would do is I would figure out a way to download. And actually, if you guys know Carlos Alvarez, he had his podcast intro. And so he had two different versions of I think it was a voice. I can't remember if it was a voiceover or a song, but he's one of our partners. And he was like, hey, I want to use PickFu to test the intro for my podcast. And they had two different voiceovers and they were pretty similar, but he ran them through PickFu on a big test. And one was clearly the winner over the other. And so he literally just downloaded the audio tracks for both. And I think it wasn't the whole voiceover, but it was maybe I think you can pay some people on Fiverr. I don't know where he sourced the talent from, but essentially uploaded a sample, not the whole thing. I think maybe you pay a little bit and you're like, hey, can you read the first 10 seconds of this? Uploads it and it's like, hey, which one is better for a podcasting show on e-commerce? And so if you ever listen to his podcast, that was tested in advance on PickFu, and the winning one is what won.
Wow, that's crazy.
Big fans of Carlos.
Oh, 100%.
He's awesome.
Love him. Love Carlos.
So you can actually
we might use PickFu for a few things for this show.
Yeah, I mean, PickFu sounds awesome. I know that we focus this more on the Amazon side, but I mean, it sounds like you can use it for quite literally anything. Is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And what I'll say too is e-commerce is one of our bigger verticals, but we also have other verticals as well. So we have publishing, author. So like obviously you spent all this time to write a book, but if the cover doesn't look good, no one's going to read the inside of the book. It's the reality. Same thing with mobile game development. So a really big application, and we've got pretty much all of the big game manufacturers. I can't say who they are, but everyone uses us and they use it to test their app store icon. Right? Many variations of their app store icon. We also see it for like character game development. So they'll say, hey, this character does this in the game. Should he look like this or this or this or this? And these are things that you don't really think of. And how is some dev that's working on this project? All of these options look really good, but like which one looks the most brutal? Which one of these cars looks the fastest? Which one of these trucks looks the most, the coolest?
And so naturally with something like testing, you ask 10 people, what if, and 10 people is a very small sample size, I understand, but let's say you do 1,000 people. What if you get a very, very split test, like a 49-51 or does a 50-50 ever happen?
Yeah, 50-50 happens all the time. And it can be an indication of two things. Sometimes it means that neither of the options are good, but more likely than not, it means that both options are very strong. And so when you're first starting off, like if I'm making a variation on my packaging, I'll consistently see one's getting like 90%, one's getting like 10%. And it's like, okay, that's really, really good. Or maybe 60-40 split. But once I've gone through a few variations of the packaging and I'm really starting to isolate individual variables, I like to start very wide, go down that funnel until I get to the end. When I'm getting to the end of the funnel, I'm very regularly going to see a 50-50 split. And what that means is it's saying, okay, you're changing things that are very small and people are kind of indifferent to the both. But if I would go back and change that later stage design against what I started with, I can almost guarantee that it's gonna crush it. And that's what happens most of the time. That's what, you wouldn't really run that test in the end because it's gotten better. But yeah.
But if you really wanted to.
Yeah. And so I know e-commerce is a very large vertical of yours, and Amazon is, of course, the biggest chunk of the pie, I would imagine. But are you seeing anyone split test content to be targeted, let's say, towards Walmart versus Amazon? Like, can you even separate those two demographics or buyer personas?
Well, the thing that's really cool about that is there's all these other platforms opening up. Obviously, you can have a totally customized Shopify store. And so the really cool thing about Amazon is super strict, right? They have very strict TOS about what you can and can't put in images. And so the testing doesn't really change for me. What it actually does is if I'm selling on another platform that has more ambiguous or less enforced terms of service, then what I'm going to do is it's going to give me more creative freedom, more ability to kind of play around, because there's a lot of things that people used to do on Amazon that Amazon has cracked down on, and they're really helpful for conversion optimization, like showing review infographics or, putting different guarantees or stuff. And so I'm going to just take what I know has worked that I know I can put on other platforms that Amazon locks down on. And I'm going to play with all of those tools just for optimizing conversion optimization. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Interesting.
Yeah. And then what about pricing? Is pricing something that you can A/B test?
Oh,
I don't recommend it. So people do go on PickFu to test pricing, and they're launching a product, and they're like, "What would you pay?" Like a lot of people, they do is like, "Okay, I'm selling this mug. What would you pay for the mug?" I think people do it. If they want to do it, that's fine. But you can hear me saying this on the show. I don't think that's what you should do, because the people who are responding, they don't know what the mug is. They're not buying the mug. It's not a good idea. Also, people try to split test their price, and they'll say, "Hey, should this be $25 or should it be $29.99?" There's really good tools right now that let you isolate price split testing on Amazon in the real world. And so price is one of the factors that works really, really well. Like you can use Listing Dojo, you can use Splitly to do that, and you can test your price in real life. That is the ultimate gold standard, because these are real customers, right? You can actually see in the real world, if I change my price from $25 to $29.99, does my click-through, does my conversion rate go up, whatever percent? And these are real people actually buying your product. Where PickFu is much more helpful is for testing broad scale creative changes, right? Not trying to find which one won, but why it won, and understanding the rationale behind why a customer chose a specific option. So I don't recommend using PickFu for price. Yeah.
Well, the pricing question I had was like, how does pricing through PickFu work? Because you had mentioned before that a lot of that large scale market research and like, focus groups and things aren't really within the financial reach of a lot of these sellers. So are you paying per test, like per item that you're sending, like asking the questions? You guys have a name for it, and I'm forgetting it right now.
Yeah, we call it a poll, and everything. So it's super cheap. Everything starts at $1 per response with a minimum of 50 responses. So for as little as $50, you get a test. As you make the poll larger and as you add on audience targeting, it goes up slightly. It kind of depends. So I think if you're picking like, hey, I want to isolate an Amazon Prime audience, I think it's like $65. So the price goes up marginally. Some groups that are more specific are a little bit more expensive. Yeah, and basically there's no subscription required. We were really insistent on that anyone can start. You don't need a plan. But if you are running more than 3 polls in a month, it's going to make sense to get a subscription because you get a per poll discount. You can add in audience targeting cheaper. And then for people on the real big end, right, these are our agencies, larger clients, like major brands. They're just buying prepaid credits in advance. That's going to give you the best discount. I think the largest we sell now, which it's crazy to even say this, is prepaid credits for 30 grand. And some companies are going through that on a monthly basis, which is bonkers to me. But they're big companies, right? And so what we're seeing is large companies dedicating as much as 1% of gross revenue to market research, which in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot if you're doing a lot of money, but it's really small in the grand scheme of things.
Wow.
Well, it's very mature for the e-commerce space, I would say, specifically, because I mean, in the I hate to say the real world, but maybe in the more traditional retail, conglomerate Fortune 500 company end, they're using companies like Optimizely that are charging hundreds of thousands of dollars a month just to run a split test on like minor color changes, minor logo changes, minor call to action changes. And of course, they're using different types of technology. But I would say this is very mature for the e-commerce space. It's something.
Well, and I guess what I'll say is it hasn't always been like this, right? When I started selling I remember when I went to that Startup Bros conference in Orlando, one of the speakers who I'm good friends with now, his name is Will Tershelen, really cool guy. He owns a company called Goat Consulting. And his whole strategy that he made his first $4 million on Amazon with his brother was they would just go order sample quantities from Alibaba, order like 100 different products, like 30 items of each, throw them up with not even a great listing, and just see out of those 100 products, what actually stuck, what sold. And that was a good strategy to see, okay, wooden sunglasses, like these 5 products won, scrap all of the rest, double down on those and really invest. And you could make a lot of money on Amazon just from arbitraging certain products that are on there. Over the past couple of years, it's changed, right? We hear about these companies like Thrasio, a $1 billion valuation profitably, the fastest that it's ever been. I think in the whole aggregator industry, like millions on top of millions and even billions of dollars are being thrown into it. And the reason why is because in the past year, especially since COVID, we've seen major big box retailers either going out of business or closing a lot of their stores, like Victoria's Secret, GNC, all of these big brands. And the thing that I always like to say is, they're not just sitting at their corporate offices at Victoria's Secret and saying, hey, we closed 500 stores this year worldwide. I'm not really worried about that. Everything is fine. No, they're sitting down and they're saying like, okay, we need to double down on this e-commerce thing, right? We need to double down. And so now there's all of these additional resources being pumped into FBA, into e-commerce in general. And this is just a simple fact is like, in order to succeed now versus before, you need to have every part of your business really well optimized. So that includes your product, it includes your branding, it includes every part of the business. And if you're missing out on one factor, you're going to get beat by one of the companies that is treating this like a real business, not like a hobby. And so I think the reason it's gotten so mature is like, this is the reality, is like you might be able to make a little bit of money, but it's not going to be a good long-term win if you're not treating every part of your business legitimately. And market research is something that every legitimate business does. And so if you're like, hey, I'm going to skimp, this is going to be one part. I think real success in business is like, there's all these little 1% marginal gains that you're going to make. And PickFu is one of those. It's not going to radically change your business, but it is going to be one of those things that you should be, whether you use PickFu or something else. Market research is one of those things that someone in your company needs to do at some point in time.
Absolutely.
Again, beautifully put.
100%.
You're on a roll today, Anthony. It must be the shirt, man.
Just
but
vibing.
Yeah, just vibing. And I think that is, but one point that you just hit is important also to know. And I think this is where even, you taking the leap of faith and going to the Philippines and starting up your business, you treated it like a real business, rather than treating it like a side hustle, which to a lot of people, it is just a side hustle. I want some extra money to buy nicer things, to renovate my home, to do whatever it is they want to do. For those that are treating it like a side hustle, do you think they should go on to PickFu and start to scale up? Or I guess, who is this best fit for? As much as I'm sure it would be fit for everyone, but like, really, who is PickFu best for?
I think PickFu really does work for everyone. It's something that makes sense whether you're a beginner seller or whether you're a big seller. It's one of those things that it's something that you need to do for your business, getting market research. I would say it's a very valuable insurance policy against making big mistakes. I think real success in business as well. Business actually isn't very complicated. I think it's really more about error reduction and making sure, not that you're making the right decision, but making sure you're not making crucial big mistakes, which is why I think courses are somewhat helpful, is because it can help you, if you're taking the right ones, avoid making the characteristic errors that people have. With that being said, like if you should do it, if you're a hobby person or not, I think there's probably some ability to make money on Amazon still, just treating it as a hobby. But like, if there's one thing I've learned, if you want to be successful, if you really want to do well in business, you can't take money out of the business. I firmly believe this for the first 2 years. And if you're thinking about like, I want to extract any cash from the business in the first 2 years, you might be able to do okay, but it's going to come at the expense of your brand growing as fast as it could. And so I learned this from my business partner. When I went to work on the creative agency, he was making a good bit of money from the creative agency and just kind of taking the cash payouts and the checks. But once I got on board, and I didn't get paid very much money either, we decided, he's like, I'm not taking a dime out of this business. And he didn't take any money out of the business. We put it all back into the business, and he didn't make any money for 2 years off that business until we sold the company. And so it's like, if we didn't have done that, if he's like, hey, I need to keep taking the same amount every month, we would not have been able to scale like we did inside of 2 years. And that's just the reality of the situation. I think like, if you just want to make an extra $1,000, $2,000 a month, you can probably do that on like $5,000 of revenue. That's fine. And that's all that some people want. That's cool. But if you're looking to say, I want a multi-million-dollar brand, it's just about what you want. Like if you want to have a multi-million-dollar brand, that's something that's going to be a big asset you can sell. You got to treat it like that. If you want to have a hobby business making a couple grand a month, I think it's still probably reasonable to do it. But it's just about what you want.
It's like day trading versus investing, I would say.
I think that's a good,
whole another conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, you sit there all day and you're making that little bit of money. And if you want a little bit of money now, that's great, but you can make a whole bunch of money later, especially with these aggregators. Like you said, Thrasio. I think I just saw some other aggregator that got an even larger piece of funding than Thrasio.
Yeah, got 750 million.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah.
Like it's insane. And I think we're going to start to see these brands really start to need to be to optimize, right? Something that might have been making a few million a year. They want to take that next scale up, and maybe they didn't think about creative. Maybe they didn't, they were pouring money into product development without actually finding out what worked and what didn't. And so I'm a big fan of everything that you said. I think we're going to look into PickFu after this because there's a lot of things, that we talk about in the office. We're like, is this good? Is that good? And we end up texting our friends and we're like, we have like 20, 30 people that we can get some recommendations from.
When we were redoing the background for this podcast, I turned my computer around and asked you guys, I'm like, okay, version 1 through 12, which do you prefer? Y'all are like, what's the difference? I'm like, how can you not see it? So definitely going to be looking into that. Well, Anthony, thank you so much, dear. We are at the top of our hour mark. Where can folks get a hold of you if they have any questions about any of the information that you shared today or about PickFu? Just where can they find you?
Anthony at PickFu.com.
I love it. Quick and easy. And then we'll go on ahead and just put the website on the screen as well. For those listening, it's Pikview, PickFu.com, which, boy, that sounds rough spelling it out loud. What's the origins of the name? Do you know?
I do know it's pick, so you're picking between two options, and then Kung Fu is like the mastery of something, so which one's going to be the winner in the end. So it's a kind of combination of that. They PickFu tested it, and as well, the domain was available, which we all know when you're trying to build a business is actually very challenging.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, especially nowadays.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, Anthony, again, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your information with us. If you guys liked what you heard or saw today, please be sure to give this video a like, comment with your thoughts, share with your friends, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring that bell for the notifications so that you get alerted anytime we go live with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Anthony Cofrancesco from PickFu. Anthony, thank you again, dear, so much. Francois, happy to chat with you as always. Everybody have a wonderful, very safe Memorial Day weekend, and we will see everybody next week.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's been fun.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
All right,
Bye.